Then she says these words, guys, my commission on that deal was $500,000 per year.
Wow.
I lost $2.5 million because I assumed he was not interested and I didn't follow up on a timely manner.
Everyone, welcome to Time to Thrive. If sales strategy were a superhero sport, Doug Brown would be the caped crusader of conversion. As CEO of CEO Sales Strategies and the creator of a mathematically predictable sales growth model, Doug just doesn't talk about sales success, he calculates it. He's trained teams for legends like Tony Robbins and Chet Holmes, increased sales by quadruple digits and helped generate nearly $1 billion in combined revenue. Doug has built over 35 businesses. And if that doesn't impress you, he's also the mastermind behind the BitNo, a sales automation platform that does everything but make your coffee. He's a military veteran, a family man, and a lover of all things systematized because in Doug's world, chaos is the enemy and follow up is king. So buckle up because when Doug steps in, sales stop being a mystery and start being a well oiled machine. Welcome to the show, Doug.
Hey, Bethany, thanks for having me here.
Thanks for being
After
here.
that
Okay.
introduction, I'm
Pick a
gonna go
number
get a
between one and
cape.
five for our super random question that
Okay.
strikes terror into the heart of all guests. What number?
What number? What was the question? I'm sorry.
Number between 1 and 5.
4.
4. What is one thing you wish you spent more time doing when you were younger?
Well, evidently for my intro, I should have been building a cape. But
Learning how to sew.
one thing as a child, I wish I had done more of. Frankly, uh, this might sound a little weird, but trust my instincts more. You know,
Mm,
yeah,
that's a good one because,
yeah,
especially around, that puberty area, we kind of feel very self-conscious
yeah,
and lack that
yeah.
confidence.
Yeah, I grew up in an environment where like good was never good enough type thing, right? So
Mm,
it was, and I'm sure some people can relate to that. Um, and it was like, hey, if you got an A, it was like, why didn't you get an A plus, right? That type of
right.
thing. So I would say that that would be the thing. It's an interesting question. I probably should have picked 2 versus 4, but got a different question.
But trust your instincts. 4 was the right question. So you have built or helped build over 35 businesses, which is very impressive. What I mean, having in that process, what have you observed in terms of the difference? What separates thriving businesses from those that struggle? What are the you see any trends in all your experience there?
Yeah, yeah, I have this. There's several. Well, the first thing is if it's a startup process, you got to act like a startup process, not a mature company, right? So, in
Mm,
all startup companies, till they get to the first $1 million, the only thing they should focus on is sales and getting to $1 million. So too many companies are suiting up, hey, when we become this, right? And then they're spending money on long-term, marketing processes or whatever, and their short-term cash flow burns out, long before they get there. So that's one of the mistakes. And then the second mistake is when they get to the $1 million, they continue to keep acting like they're at the million, below the $1 million, and they don't put systems, processes, and start looking at all of that needs to go in to actually allow the business to scale. So they end up either building the business on their back, or they just sort of kind of put the pedal down and rev out at a certain place and get stuck. So those are usually the 2 major ones. The third one I think is just getting our own head out of the game, right? And realizing it's a business and to treat it like a business. So many people have their and I've done this. I made probably every mistake we'll ever talk about today.
Yeah, right.
But we tie our identity to the business, so we start making decisions not on objective but subjective. And that's in part why I started using data so much and using metrics so much, because
Mhm.
I was tying my identity to it and I was not making decisions that actually should have been made a lot earlier than I made them.
We could do a whole show on the whole mindset, emotions, and all of that because we're human, right?
Yeah.
And we operate from our own bias, our own experiences, and it's hard to see. We don't know what we don't know as we go along. So we rely too heavily, often, as to your point, on um, the emotions and things within ourselves rather than the data, which really tells the truth. It doesn't lie, you know.
I haven't found it to lie yet. And if it does, it's telling the lie that should have been told anyway. So, which is ultimately the truth. And yeah, I mean, even in selling, there's something called buyer's bias, right? So we tend to sell the way we want to be sold to, and that doesn't always work out because if we look at profiles of different people, they have different even personality traits, like
Correct.
many
Yeah.
people know like the disc style or something, right? So
Right.
if you're dealing with a director, a high director who wants quick answers and, get to the point, kid, and just the facts, but you're trying to, and your buying bias is, methodical, where you want to show lots of spreadsheets and graphics and things. Rapport is not going to be built very easily in that process. So we've got to be able to adapt to people's styles, get out of our own bias.
Right. I used to break those down into 4 animals. I know it sounds funny. The bull, the tiger, the owl, and the lamb, right? And the bull was that one that you're talking about is
Yeah.
like I looking at their watch, they just want the facts, get to it, that kind of thing. Give me the information I need to make a decision.
Mhm.
And the owl is that one that wants to see all the numbers and all the data. They're more the analytical type. And the
Mhm.
tiger is typically the salesperson's personality, which is wide open and, extroverted and, um, talks about their family and is very open with everything. And then the lamb appears to be the tiger, but they're really not.
Yeah.
And they're the
Yeah.
worst because you don't, they're the one who's the China egg, right? The one who's like telling you, oh, I just need to think about it some more. And really, they have no intention of ever buying.
No,
Or there's some hidden objective they're not telling you.
the great pretender, right?
Yeah,
That type
right.
of.
Can you break down I know you have a very predictable, measurable sales model, that, you have developed. Is that something you can break down for us and show us what it would look like in action for a small business?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Step number one is getting truthful about what the clear goal is. And believe it or not, that's a really difficult thing for most people to do, because they have in their mind, "Hey, I want this," and then they run up against barriers and challenges, and then they'll start saying, "Well, let's change it to this," or "Well, I didn't really want that. I'd be okay with this," right? So now they're building all these plans out that are not even what they want. So so first step is always just get a truthful goal,
Yeah,
committed, truthful goal. Number 2 is make sure that we're figuring out the numbers in reality to what that truthful goal is. So let me just illustrate and say, let's say somebody wants to, I don't know, we'll make this easy, $100,000 in income out of their business or $1 million revenue at whatever, 10%, which would be low. But we've got to now factor in how many sales we have to make to hit these numbers, no matter what the number is. It could be, you know, 25 million. We still have to figure this in. But then we also have to look at other factors like what's our return rate? What's our churn rate? What's our what's our drop here and there rate? What's all of these ratios we got to look at, because let's say that comes to 25%. our cost of sale included in that process. Well, we might think we need to sell 100 things and we need to sell 125 things. And now we're off on our numbers and we're like, why are we not hitting our goal? It is so common for people not to figure things in like cost of sale into their plan. So we get those two very clear. Then what we do is we build around a massive uh, prospecting plan, if you will. And it's no more than what most people would do, massive prospecting. In our massive prospecting, we get 6 new methods of incoming and outgoing leads working within a 12-month period. Now, what we're looking at when we're building these things out, just prior to it, is identifying who the ideal right fit buyer is. Because so many people are off target on their ideal right fit buyer. So, when you ask somebody, they'll be like, well, somebody will buy, let's say we're, I don't know, a roofing company. Anybody who wants to buy a roof. It's like, no, who's the best buyers, if you will, within that market? That's the ones we should be going after first.
Mhm.
um, Once we understand who they are, what they want, what they need, what they fear, what they desire in detail, then we can create our marketing and prospecting methods to go after these people. If not, our messaging will be off, our targeting will be off. We're gonna get more stalls, objections, pretenders in the game more than we want to, right? You're gonna see far more lambs in the process, in your world than you want to, and, that creates a lot of stress. Plus, it's costing every time we go out for a cost of sale, it is a cost of sale whether we sell it or not. So, this is one of the reasons I teach people don't discount. Because a lot of people just discount. Oh, we'll go from here to here. It's like, no, you've got to now sell 7 things to make up for that discount, right? So once we get that in, then it's really a straight sales process, right? Like reach outs to connections, to responses, to appointments, to closes, to follow up closes, to increase transactional value, increase buying frequency. Those are metrics we're going to track. So we develop a metrics plan based off what we're trying to do. Those metrics are super important to track those metrics because those metrics will tell us an objective story, or at least they'll give us an indication there's a story there. So, for example, let's say somebody's reaching out and all the reach outs are fine. They're getting connections and responses back. They're positive responses, but they have no appointments. Like I just had a client that in his case, he set 165 appointments. 5 people showed up. Like,
Wow.
why? Right? So when we look back at what he was doing, this was not I didn't take him from day one. This is he was having this challenge. When we look back at his company, what they were doing, they set 165 appointments between 2 salespeople that week. 5 appointments resulted out. They were dealing with the wrong buyer profile. They were going to a director level within the company, and they needed to be at the CEO level of the company because the director was now going, "Hey, boss lady, boss man, I found this great thing. I think we ought to go up and spend it." And they'd go, "Well, how much was it?" And they go, "Well, I don't know. It's going to be somewhere between 65,000 and a couple $100,000." The CEO is like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, break, break, break." We're not. I don't think we need to invest that kind of money. So they were canceling the appointments off the ratio, right? So we want to look at these metrics, and we can measure all kinds of metrics. And so, if we're getting lots of appointments, but we're not closing, where are we off?
Mhm.
Well, it's usually in either the idea right fit buyer is not clear, the messaging's not clear, or frankly, the sales person or people selling don't know how to do conversational conversion. They're trying to, do an old sales pitch or something. So that's the next stage that we work with. Once we identify what's going on, we work with them on the languaging, the patterns, what they need to be saying in these meetings, how they're setting these meetings. I'd be shocked. Most people never set an agenda for a meeting ever. Right? They just show up, "Hey, how you doing?" And they kind of willy-nilly it. And then follow-up is wrapped around this whole process. So follow-up is at every step and every little ticked and tied place within the process, because most people are not doing follow-up well. And so we do that as the system, then we train people on the mind shifts that must happen within that particular system. Because we can, again, if we got our identity tied to this thing and all of a sudden, you know, as Tony Robbins would say in years ago, you set your thermostat at 72 and you're trying to, and now you're at 75, 78. Well, your air conditioners kick in and bring the business back down, right? So we're constantly adding in these mind processes as we go along on every single level of the game. That's the whole system, kind of in a nutshell.
Well, what's interesting about that is about 5 years ago, we built a SaaS platform
Mhm.
for real estate agents. And
Yep.
one of the pieces of that is we were able to ask them very specific questions, not just about what their gross commission goal was for the year, but, what their close ratios were on a buyer appointment, what their close ratio was on a listing appointment. And we reverse engineered all this information to determine how many phone calls they needed to make a day, how many appointments they needed to have a week in order to hit that goal.
Yeah.
And that's a real reality check because it just doesn't come to you. And I
No,
think that's a mistake that a lot of people they put out a shingle and don't realize. Oh, and it's just like with marketing. Like a lot of business owners don't realize you have to wear a marketing hat if you're going to be a business owner, but you have to wear a sales hat too. So these are skills that aren't necessarily native to them because they've learned how to do whatever it is their specialty is, but it can be learned, right?
well, but yeah, they're all learned skills, and if they look, I don't know about anybody listening to this, but I know when I was in grade school or high school, I didn't have one marketing class. I didn't have one sales class, right? Now, I was fortunate enough to start working at my dad's business when I was 3 years old. So I actually was immersed in this process and seeing this stuff. But for most people, no. I mean, and many people have fear of rejection. So that even further compounds the issue, right? Because you're not going to be a salesperson without experiencing rejection,
Right. And a
right?
lot
And
of it.
yeah, I mean, I still get it today. People, like, well, you have over $1 billion in sales. You know, uh, is it in my industry? It's like, it'd be the first thing that comes out. And it's like, well, I've worked with over 350, I think it's like 363 industries or something at this point. And it's like they'll push back, right? So there's going to be a bit of rejection. No matter who you are. I've seen rejection. Tony Robbins, when I worked with Tony as his president of training and sales, right? He got rejection, right? He got pushback. So it really doesn't matter what level we're at. We must learn those skills. If nothing else, if you learn marketing, how to generate a lead, quality lead, and how to close a quality lead, you'll never go hungry,
Right.
right? So it's one of those things that those are two must have. You can
Yeah.
build $100 million company just with those 2 things. Now, it'd be chaotic as heck, but it still can be done.
I think there's still a lot of people who have this idea that being a salesperson, they have this sleazy,
Yeah.
you know, something about it. And they're like, I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be that person that's nagging someone or constantly on somebody trying to, you know, talk them into something. But that's not really what true sales is. So
No.
maybe you could speak to that a little bit and kind of, the myth of the salesman.
Yeah, so there's a couple of points there, like the nagging thing, let me hit that first, right? So, statistics clearly show that people want people to follow up with them. So, I'll give some people some stats. 12% of people who engage in a sales process, Salesforce.com did this and other studies did this. 12% want people to follow up with them until they actually get them, even no matter how long it takes, right? 57% of the audience wants you to follow up with them, but in a helpful manner, not in a pushy, pressure manner. Now, the interesting thing is that the majority of people expect between 3 and 5 touch points with a salesperson. And out of those 5 touch points, let's say, they want 3 conversations on average. So if you look at like, hey, I'm going to be nagging this person, it's not about nagging. They're expecting you to talk with them. They're almost 60%, 6 out of 10 are saying, I want you to follow up and stay in touch with me. And 12% until I die, or if you die, I still want you to continue to keep following up with me, right? So it's not a nagging situation. It is a perception of someone who's usually either been conditioned this way or they've experienced a very bad sales process and they go, I don't want that. Now, no one wants that. I don't want that either. I remember one time I was in uh, Best Buy, if you're listening to this, um, and I wanted to buy a new TV because, like, we were talking about sports, right? I watched the hockey games and things like that, and some other sports. But men, we want a big screen TV. Why? We want our friends to come over and go, "Ooh, look at that big screen TV," right? I mean, that's just our folks. Remember, there's always a business return on investment and a personal return on investment on any sale. So you got to sell to both of those. For me, it was vanity. I wanted a 100-inch television screen, really, when it came down to it, right? So I was prepared. I was like, I know what it costs. I know this. I've done my research. I walk into Best Buy and I'm like, there's the TV. It's like, oh, everything opens
Angel
up.
singing.
And so I'm there with my wife. And the gentleman I talked with, I said, "Hey, I'm looking to buy this large screen TV." He goes, "Oh, great. We got this and this and this and this." And he keeps talking to me and I'm looking sideways and I'm seeing my wife go, like she's giving nod and I know her moods. And I'm like, dude, talk to my wife too, will you? And he's like, "Oh, sorry, ma'am," and he starts talking to her. And then he comes right back to me and focuses right on me. And then I hear these golden words come out of my wife's mouth. "Hey, I'm a person too, and I'm right here." And and he goes, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And she, and he starts talking to her. She asks a couple of questions, and then the Best Buy guy goes right back to me. I have this credit card burning a hole in my pocket to get out just to get this television. Do you think I ever bought that television?
On principle, probably not.
There is no way in heaven or hell I would buy that television, right? Not even that model again, because she's got it imprinted in her head that this guy is no good. It was a terrible sales process that he had. And there's no way I'm going to be watching this TV and have her walk by, look at that television and go, hmm, yeah, you remember that time that guy really was being rude to me, and I know her well enough to know that was gonna happen. I still today don't have that television. I bought a different one from a different place. And the reason I'm bringing that story up is that's a bad sales process. So, sales is win, win, win. I wrote a book called Win Win Selling: Unlocking the Power of Profitability by Resolving Objections. And I talk a lot about win, win, win. And win, win, win means they win, you win, someone else wins. So if you do this right, more than one person wins. If you're the seller and you win and they lose, bad sale. You're going to get that reputation that we're talking about. If the seller wins and you lose, bad deal for you. You're not going to want to sell, right? So if both of you win, that's win-win, i.e. they get, why do people buy, right? They want to solve a problem, they want to gain an opportunity, or they want to get a goal. Those are the 3 reasons that all human beings on this planet buy: problem, opportunity, or a goal. And so our job as the salesperson is to help them get what they're looking for. As long as our product or service is good for what they're doing, then we have a moral obligation to help them solve that problem, get that opportunity, gain that goal. And if we do that, that's win-win in itself. Now, if we do this the right way, they're going to feel so good about something that other people, like the CEO of the company, like, oh my God, this solved all my stress, all my problems. That CEO will settle down and everybody else in the company will have better days because that CEO is not all stressed out, right? That's win-win-win. So if we're just playing win-win-win to solve people's problems, help them with the opportunities and gain a goal, and we know it is a match, then we don't have to worry about being one of those salespeople because that's the game that we're playing. If we don't play by those rules, then we're a bad salesperson. And yeah, we're going to come off as, no disrespect to the used car, stereotype, right? Um, or the lounge lizard in the bar trying to pick the girl up, right? I mean, it's the same type of process. So it's all about one person winning and the other person losing. That's where this whole thing comes in, Bethany, that I know of.
Yeah.
Um,
So you just talked about one mistake that people make, and that is that they think there's, that they have to be pushy or they have to be the one talking all the time instead of
right.
asking questions and being curious. Another mistake I think we make because we hear, sales is about relationship, and then we try and be buddies. And I think that's a mistake too. We don't need buddies. What we need is for people to know, like, and trust us in a way that makes them comfortable in the sale. I mean, you've worked with startups, Procter and Gamble, and everything in between. What is some of the mistakes that businesses are making today that we need to avoid? Like we've just talked about too, but what are some other mistakes they make in the sales process?
Assuming the prospect's not interested, that's another one that people. I was on a sales consulting call for sales consultants, and I messaged the person who put it on, who happened to be a friend of mine. He invited me to it, and I'm like, these people, they don't know how to sell. Like, and he types back to me, he's like, "Yep." And I'm like, this gal comes on. Well, her name was Janice. She comes on and she goes, "Hey guys, I got to tell you a story. 7 months ago, I called this person and I assumed, based on our conversation, he said, 'Hey, can you give me a call back in 6 months?' I can't do anything right now. I'm just head down, buried in these projects." And I said, "Sure, I'll call you back." And I just didn't think he was interested. And then, I got busy, things progressed, et cetera. I just kind of forgot about him. And then I was looking through like my old contacts and I realized, man, I hadn't called him. So I called him last week. And this was Monday. So it was like Thursday she called him. And he said, "Hey, Janice, it's good to hear from you." And I think his name was Jerry or something like that. And she said, "Hey, Jerry, listen, I appreciate that. Sorry I didn't get back to you in 6 months. I had a bunch of things that were going on, et cetera, et cetera." And he goes, "Oh, that's okay. It's really nice to hear from you." She said, "Well, are you still interested in what we were talking about?" And he said, "Oh, absolutely. I was interested for sure." She goes, "Well, what do you mean you were interested?" And he goes, "Janice, you don't know?" He goes, I'm a client of your company's." And she goes, "Well, what do you mean you're a client of my company?" And then he said something like, "Yeah, I was talking to Ronnie up in and she said, "In New York?" "No, no, no, in Seattle." And "Oh, I don't know Ronnie in Seattle." "Yeah, he said he didn't know you either. And since I hadn't heard from you, I assumed you weren't with the company any longer." Because I asked Ronnie, I said, "Ronnie, I was talking to Janice and, I would like to talk with her again." He's like, I can't find her in our, I don't know who she is." And so I assumed you left. And she said, "Well, tell me what did you buy?" "Well, what we were talking about." And she said, "Well, did you do a 3-year deal?" And he said, "No, I did a 5-year deal." And she went silent, Bethany. And I'm like waiting, like with anticipation. Then she says these words, "Guys, my commission on that deal was $1.5 million per year."
Wow.
I lost $2.5 million because I assumed he was not interested and I didn't follow up on a timely manner. So that is a mistake that people make, right?
Yeah.
NASCAR, one of my clients, it took 2 years to get the first appointment with NASCAR. So, and I followed up every 2 months. I was just following up, right? So that's a big mistake. Like you said, crossing the friendly line, that is a big mistake. I have done that myself because I'm like by nature, I like to bond with people, right?
Mhm.
But when we're in a professional setting of selling, no matter what we're selling, we don't want to cross that line where we're now there. We can be friendly, but don't be the buddy because it changes the positioning of you as an expert once you cross that line as the buddy in most cases. So, those are two definitely big ones. I will say the third one that is probably bigger than both of those is most people are not prospecting enough. And so, since they're not prospecting enough, they don't have enough qualified leads to work with. And since they don't have enough qualified leads to work with, they're now getting needy in the sales process. And that's another place where people don't like people doing that. I think the other big mistake that people are making is they're not tracking their numbers, and those numbers will tell that story. And so, as people are not tracking the numbers, what they're doing is they're doing activities that might not even be needed for their particular purpose to achieve their goal. And so, they're spending lots and lots and lots and lots of time that is unproductive and doing things that, if they were very clear about the numbers, they would be able to make decisions based on that particular number that they're looking to achieve, but they're not tracking it. So therefore, they're doing a lot of activity and working way harder than they need to.
So tell me, what's the strangest sales tactic you've ever seen work? And would you recommend something like that?
Well, I don't know if I recommend it every time, but yeah, I guess I would actually. The strangest sales tactic. I had a client who was pursuing a very large hospital chain. They were trying to get into this hospital chain, and the person that they needed to talk to just wasn't giving them the time of, not even time of day, not even time of moment. They just kept snubbing him off, snubbing him off. And he was super frustrated and was talking to me. And I said, "Well, how long's it been?" He goes, "Come next Thursday, it will be 2 years that we have been trying to get into this company."
Wow, that's persistence.
Yeah. And I said, "Well, how far are they away from you?" And he said, "No, it's less than 20-minute drive." I said, "Well, here's what I would do. I would go down to a bakery, get a cake, and have them write happy anniversary on the cake. And I want you to take the cake over, walk into the office and say, 'I'd like to speak to Margot,' whatever her name was, right? That's her first name was Margot, actually. And they're going to ask you right at the front gate, 'Well, what are you trying to do?' And you're going to say, 'Tell her I'm here to celebrate our anniversary.'" And he said, "What?" I said, "Just trust me. You'll get through the gate." Right? And so he did. And he got stopped at security and he did exactly that. And they went, "What do you mean, anniversary?" "I'm here to celebrate our anniversary," right? And they're like, okay, go through." Right? And so he gets into the department and he walks up and the receptionist is there. And he says, I'm here to talk to Margot." And she said, "Well, do you have an appointment?" "No, I'm here for my anniversary." And she went, "What? In my anniversary?" And she said, "Well, hold on, please." And she calls Margot on the phone system. "Hey, Margot, somebody's here talking about you have an anniversary together." Right? And she walks out and she knew who he was.
Right.
And she goes, "What are you doing?" He goes, "Margot, today I have been calling you for 2 years straight. And I'm here to celebrate with you and the office our 2-year anniversary. And I brought a cake.
How can you
And
be mad?
he got his appointment. Everyone in the office enjoyed the cake. Right. So, so my point being is sometimes you just have to be bold
Yeah,
and take a risk. And that that would be something that I don't know if I'd recommend for everybody because some people are a little faint of heart doing that, but I certainly would recommend being bold and standing out from the crowd, if you will.
yeah. One thing that we did, years ago with a client is, we got some of those, candies that look like little baby feet. I guess they're supposed to be for celebrating baby showers or whatever,
Okay. Yep.
and we would take, 3 of them, tie them together with a ribbon with the business card, and walk into a business and say, "I just wanted to get my foot in the door."
Right.
Just little things like I know it's a little cheesy, but it's memorable and it's different. And as the head of a marketing agency, I get salespeople after me all the time. They want to sell, different advertising for my clients and things like that. And the one that really stood out in my mind was she came by and I wasn't in the office, but she came by and she dropped off 6 of those incredible cupcakes, like all the
Oh, yeah.
fancy.
Yeah.
Well, I felt obligated. I mean,
Yeah.
I felt like I owed her a phone call because we enjoyed those cupcakes. So, just if you've qualified that prospect and you know that you know, that you have a solution for them, it's worth going all in.
Well, when we give a gift to somebody, no matter how small, it's just kind of a human thing that we want to reciprocate. And so if we want to reciprocate, what are they really asking? They're asking to talk. So it's not like that a big thing usually, right? That we're trying to reciprocate on. So, it's not like they're asking us, hey, let's take a 4-week trip to France and just, hang out together. So that it tends to work. It's just kind of a human psychology.
Yeah, yeah. I love the ideas though. Um, if you could put up a billboard, let's get tactical for a second. If you could put up a billboard that every entrepreneur in America would see tomorrow, what would it say?
Well, know your business you're in. That would be my billboard, right? And because everybody thinks they're in business, like I have we're at the location right now. We have a tree company. They take down trees. They do everything with trees, right? So, and this time of year they're super busy because it's warmer out. And so when I talked to the owner of that company, I'm like, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" He's like, "Oh, well, we do tree maintenance and cut down trees and do this and do that and do that." Okay, so if I talk to a gentleman who I did the other day, who's owns a heating and air conditioning company, I'm like, "Well, what do you do for?" And they're like, "Oh, well, we install, mini splits and ducts and all this terminology with air conditioning, and we also do some plumbing." And if I talk to a medical company, they're like, "Well, we provide medical devices for people who can't walk very well or whatever." And then I ask them all the same question: "What business are you really in?" And they all look at me puzzled, and I'm like, "You just described what you do. What is the business of the business?" And, and the reason I would put that up on a billboard is because the business we're all in is really client acquisition. And we tend to forget that and cloud that. And so then we don't prospect enough. We don't have enough going on in the business to actually feed the business. And we look at it from a different perspective. But if you look at all businesses, I mean, take Walmart, right? I mean, Walmart, if they didn't have clients coming through the door, they didn't work on client acquisition, which they all the time do. there'd be a lot of product on the shelves in Walmart, and they wouldn't be
Yeah, they
selling it.
go out of business pretty fast.
Yeah, yeah.
Customers.
Yep.
Yeah,
So that would be my billboard.
awesome. I think the reason I asked that question is because it the answer kind of points to a lot of the mistakes that entrepreneurs make when they think about their business and they're, promoting themselves. And, you know, thinking about what you do, that's what your competitors do. You all do it. It doesn't really say anything about how you're different and
That's a
what,
really good
how
point.
you're solving the problem in a way that maybe is more relevant for that particular customer. So, I think to your point, that's a good thing for people to understand the actual business that you're in and how you're doing it different. So if there was from this show, if there was one or two key takeaways, what would you want people to remember?
Um, get clear on what you want. That's the first thing, right? Because I find so many people are in business and building business, and I'm guilty of this at times too, right? So it's not like I'm preaching where I never made this error, right? But people usually set their goals once or twice a year, right? That type of thing, or every other year, which is even worse, right? But they're not clear on actually what they want. So what they're doing, Bethany, is they're building a business that's running their life versus them having a business that supports their life. And I had an older gentleman once say to me, uh, his name's Ray Lowe. He calls himself the luckiest guy in the world. He's like, Doug, the mistake people make is they don't design their life first and then design their business around that life. And it takes on this entity of its own self over that period of time. And he said, then they don't like their life. And, but they tie their identity to the business. So if something happens to the business, their life falls apart. And I took that to heart.
Yeah.
Um, because what do you want your life to be like? It's like, right after we're done with this, I'm going to lunch with my wife, and we're going to sit down and we're saying, hey, for the next X amount of years, how do we want to live, right? And that will determine what we say yes or no to in the business. So if we want to grow this huge company, let's say, because it supports our lifestyle, then we're going to focus on that plan. But if we want to focus on, say, a recurring business that has, I don't know, a few $100,000 a year that's coming in where we only have to work, you know, 10 hours a week, that's okay too, if that's what we wanted. So I would challenge everybody to please do that, number one, and make it truthful. And then figure out what you got to do based on the numbers of actually having to do that. Because, and figure in all the downside too, the churn, the refund rates, the cost of sale, all of that stuff. And that'll tell you how many sales you need to make actually to hit that number. From there, you got a plan, get out there every day and start doing it, right? And everything will be fine. Um, so I'd like to leave people with that, like, because I just see so many people struggling. I talked to a gentleman who's got a $7 million business, and I said, well, he called me and I'm like, well, where do you want to get it? He goes, well, nine. I'd like to get it to nine in the next 12 months. I said, okay, we can build a plan on that. He goes, well, if we can get it to 10, that would even be better. And I'm like, oh, what's the real goal? Right? Because if you tell me it's 15 million and you want to double your business and we lay a plan out to double the business and it's too much, then you're going to push back because you don't want that. And funny thing, haha, is he settled back at 9, and I started writing out the plan at 9, and he's pushing back like, "Oh man, maybe we have to push this project off for a while. I've got so many things going on." Right? It's not 9. That's the challenge. He's looking to work easier and make a little bit more money and a little bit more profit, and I know that. So now I can go back and say, is this exactly what you want? And now we make a plan on that. And that's why I want people to catch on this thing, because if they don't determine that, then the rest of it takes its life on its own. And that's when people wake up and they go, what happened in the last 40 years of my life? And geez, Dave Thomas, Wendy's did this.
Mhm.
I watched an interview with him once and he said Wendy's was the worst thing he's ever done in his life because it consumed his whole life. And now he's older. He said, I didn't enjoy my life. I didn't enjoy all the things that my kids were doing. I was just always being Dave Thomas of Wendy's. So, anyways, we all go to the same place, I think, after we're done here. How much do you want to enjoy it in the meantime? That's my message to leave people and
Yeah.
the billboard.
I think that's a great way to end the show. In this world and age of distraction, we have more distraction than we've ever had. I, I think taking the time to be intentional about what you really want, both in life and in business, and then creating a framework that supports that. Brilliant. Doug, thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing all your insights and wisdom. What would you like people to know about you, where they can find you, and how they can connect with you?
Well, Bethany, thanks for having me on, firstly. I appreciate that. To get a hold of me, they could send an email direct at doug at ceosalesstrategies.com. They can check me out on Doug Brown 123 LinkedIn if you want, or just type in Doug C. Brown revenue growth. I'll dominate the pages. And I think we have a master class or two we do every single month. And if they have questions, just reach out. We got a team of people who will answer them. So
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here.
thank you, Bethany.